Welcome back, everyone. Today we are discussing higher level tips and optimizations. If this is your first time tuning into the channel and you're looking for something that goes over strategy and playing the objectives, I highly recommend you check out my tips for the middle ranks video. I will not be repeating tips that I've made in my previous videos. In this one, I have everything broken down into knowledge, application, and for some fun, some Dota philosophies as well. I apologize in advance because I'm not going to have many clips in the background, so use your ears here, listen intently. Let's start with this knowledge section. I have it broken down into information, time, and vision, prediction, and the minimap. So Dota is a game of information, and the benefits of knowing more are better planning and quicker decision making. Knowing more really is as simple as it sounds. You want to know about how all of these heroes perform, especially about the meta heroes, and the more that you learn, the better you'll play and the better decisions you'll make. If you know Bane's cooldown on his Fiend's Grip, if you know that it gets reduced dramatically when he has an Aghanim Scepter, then you can play around Bane, especially if you have a single carry in your lineup. So just constantly grow and expand your knowledge, and the better that you get, the more you're going to start playing around things like cooldowns, and also in the lane. You're going to know when you can maybe abuse a Wraith King. You can kind of think of him like Lion. Actually, let me go to Lion first because maybe you're unaware of how to play against his mana drain. So with Lion, a lot of people start getting mana drain in the lane and then they run away from him. Actually, if he's going to get close enough to you to start mana draining, and I know it can seem like this spell is really long distance, but you want to actually try to make a move on him before you lose too much mana, and especially losing your mana for free. Do you have a Blood Grenade? Do you have a Mango? Is there some way that you can turn the tables on him and get him into maybe an auto attack trade or make him use his spells, which at early levels aren't really going to be doing the most damage to you? And similarly, if you have that kind of knowledge about a hero like Wraith King, then you can start to play around things like Spectral Blade cooldown. It might be a little more challenging playing against a carry like this, or at least it might seem more intimidating, but if he's already whacked you when you're playing Tidehunter and you're taking the Spectral Blade damage already, go after him. Keep on piling up some pressure and some damage. Now, obviously, I can't recommend any types of plays with 100% certainty, but as you play more and as you experiment more, especially experiment with your aggression, you're going to learn what you can get away with, and you can learn how you can tip trades in your favor. And as for quicker decision making, we will get back to that later. Learn how to draft and practice your drafting. This really tests your hero knowledge and it puts everything to practice for you. I recommend when you're watching a pro game, especially on a stream, pause it or mute the commentators. After they've made their first and second picks, you can just try guessing the rest of the heroes that come out. Okay, so you know that there's an Enigma first pick on one team. You know that there's an Alchemist and a Bounty Hunter on the other. If you were playing against Alchemist and Bounty Hunter, what would you have to look out for? What should you think about banning as it complements their other heroes? Typically, when you see an Alchemist, what does it mean about that draft? And how would they fill it in? You should consider a Doom, because if you can shut down the Alchemist and you can negate his healing, suddenly that hero with his ultimate doesn't do that much. So it was something that I really enjoyed, and I got to climb a lot as I watched pro games on the side. Really, if you can, focus on drafting as well. Speaking of pros and the meta, what about copying pros versus copying the meta versus your own uniqueness? I think that you can make the most leaps in your gameplay if you copy the pros. They are the quickest to understand things, and not only that, but they are playing more than anyone else. So for example, when I wanted to learn how to play Void Spirit, I thought the hero looked really cool, and I tried to play him on my own, and I performed terribly. After one bad game, I realized that I wasn't using the hero correctly. So I looked up Quinn. I looked up other players who were playing this hero in the mid lane, and I realized all the little things that I was doing wrong with the hero. I realized that I could use my Astral Step a little bit more for farming. I realized that there was a better build in the lane. If I went for some max dissimilate sometimes, that could also translate to nuking the creep waves or farming jungle camps. I also learned how to position my hero properly and to get a few more auto attacks in my one-on-ones. So I highly recommend copying the pros. If not, I at least recommend copying the meta, at least to the point where you can understand it. And then what about your own uniqueness? What about when you try playing your own favorite heroes, your win rate just isn't there? Well, maybe those heroes just aren't good for the patch. But if you have your own clever ideas, you may as well experiment with them. The first time that I ever made 5k in this game, it wasn't by playing Invoker, my favorite hero, and at the time my best hero. It was by playing support Wraith King. Now this was mostly unheard of, but I found a way that I could just take advantage of people's weaknesses and strengthen my teammates in an unusual way at that bracket. My stun was all I needed to set up team fights and to apply pressure in the lane. At the time, he had a passive with Vampiric Aura, which would give my teammates lifesteal, so I was a perfect 5. I could just put a couple points into that, help them get some HP back. If they were jungling, I could walk past them, giving them a little bit of lifesteal there. And of course, my ultimate. I didn't even have to be a good player. I could just walk in, force enemies to use their spells on me, reset, and when I come out, I'm chasing them down with stuns, and my carry's going in, knowing that a whole bunch of cooldowns are available on the enemy team. So this was one example of uniqueness working. It caught people off guard, but it was smart. It was cleverly designed, and it worked well to accentuate my team's strengths and also to take advantage of my opponents not being all that good. And my last point about information is that when you die, you should instantly know the reason why. If you don't, if you can't figure it out, then you simply don't have enough game knowledge yet. I might know that I got picked off. I might know that I missed position in a team fight. Maybe I know that because of my teammates not being positioned properly, it put me in a more vulnerable position. The thing is, I have enough information, I have enough knowledge about the game to determine what the cause of death was. Yeah, you're basically acting like your forensics now, but that is exactly how you should be thinking about the game. You shouldn't instantly jump to blaming your teammate. They could be wrong. They could be 90% wrong. But there's always a learning opportunity with everything you did. So if you know that that teammate is not providing adequate support for you, if you know that the ideal position for you in a team fight is not going to work in this game because of how your teammates are playing, you got to reshape your game. You got to change things up a little bit. Now let's talk about time. My main point here is learning how to make more use of less time. I'm not exaggerating when I say that a 1 second window is large enough for some plays to happen. That's why you've always got to be paying attention to where people are positioned and always be considering that you can get a jump on somebody. Maybe you can land a hook. Maybe you can blink in. A 3 second window is a tremendous opportunity, and a 10-second window is an eternity. Again, that 1 second window, sometimes 2, certainly with 3 seconds, it is large enough. And that's why you see so many blink daggers at higher levels, because you just want to quickly capitalize on the enemies not paying attention or a little bit of distance between how two heroes are spaced. If I'm playing Magnus, I know that it doesn't take much for me to blink in and skewer somebody in the base. I only need a split second to do that, and it doesn't even matter if some enemy supports are in the area. If I'm playing Marcy, I know that it doesn't take much for me to get my ulti off and to get a kill. So support who's at the back of the pack for what only seems like 2 seconds away is enough for me to get in, possibly get a kill, and get out. And at higher levels, basically everyone's thinking on the same page, so if I ping a support and I want to go on them with Queen of Pain, my teammates know, okay, we're about to make a jump. It doesn't take very much coordination to pull something off. People just need to be on the same page and willing to commit to it. Now let's talk about vision, prediction, and the minimap. Vision is obviously a tremendous resource, but even a lack of vision contains useful information. When you're playing Dota, you're putting two things together to try to predict where enemies are. You are using your own knowledge of the enemy heroes. For example, if I'm up against something like a lifestealer, I know that he's probably not going around the map really early on and trying to get a ton of kills. He's doing little rotations through his jungle, through his neutral creeps, so that gives me some idea of where the hero is. That is just one example of making a prediction based on knowledge. Another one, if you're ever a little bit lost and maybe you're not at that high level yet where you understand all kinds of heroes in the game, you can think about what you would do in that situation. My Drow Ranger is over here, I'm going to move up to the lane, I'm going to start farming this, but I don't see their enemy carry, so what's happening right now? Well, what I would do in that situation is I would probably be farming over here or farming over here. So sometimes, as a last resort, you could just put yourself in their shoes to try to predict where they are or what they might be up to. 7 minutes, you kind of have an idea. The two supports want to go for the Wisdom Runes. In a bit of a trickier lane, or in the example of an off lane with like an Ancient Apparition, and a Dragon Knight. I mean, what's Ancient Apparition going to do? He's not a very good ganker. So if he goes missing, he's probably doing something like stacking the Ancients. At least that is what I would do. And that can give me a little bit more information. This next tip is much harder to pull off, but this is something that you will practice as you get better, and this becomes imperative if you are someone like a Storm Spirit player, or back in the day when I was playing Exhort Invoker, and I was trying to get all these Sunstrikes all over the map. And that is to keep a mental note of where heroes were last seen on the map. So for example, this Mirana, or all of their heroes for that matter, I know that Leshrac is mid, Mirana and CK are bottom, and so if in the next 10 seconds Mirana goes missing, hopefully I had already looked at the minimap and known that she was bottom. So that gives me a little bit more prediction power. I know that she could be TPing to this mid tower or to the top tower and trying to join in her team for a gank or a fight over here, or she's just kind of gone into her own jungle, she's maybe farming a camp for herself, or there's even a third option. She's just cutting here to look for any stacks and see what's going on. Now 20 seconds from that and 30 seconds from that, I'm still keeping Mirana's last known whereabouts roughly in my head, because as I'm moving around with my team, let's just skip 60 seconds ahead. All right, let's play to update the map. Okay, so it's a little bit different now. I'm down here on the Zeus, we see Mars, and no other heroes. Now, Leshrac, 60 seconds ago, we knew that he was mid. Okay, and maybe he's already shown himself in this team fight. Where is Mirana? Where's CK? CK's taken down this tower. He could be farming this area. Mirana could be cutting across the jungle, or she's already TP'd in. It's a little bit like counting cards in this manner. You're always keeping a rough track of where heroes are on the map, where they last were, and you're using that information to predict where they might appear later. Now, does this always matter? Do you always have to have an idea of where the enemy heroes are? Or can you simply glance at the minimap every 60 seconds and update that information from scratch? You can get away with that. But like I said, when you play a lot of mobile heroes, when you're trying to make ganks around the map, when you're trying to make predictive movements around the map, having an idea of where the hero last was and using that information to predict where they might go next is going to be even more beneficial. It means your smoke ganks are going to be more accurate. It means that your ganks are going to hit quicker and on the right heroes. And it also means that when your team is moving around and spreading around, you can properly spread your heroes. For example, in a game where we have to split push, Queen of Pain might need to separate. We can safely put her towards the CK, unless he has an Orchid. Hopefully she has a Linken's. We can safely put her towards that lane. You don't really want to send Jakiro down there because yes, Jakiro could Ice Path, but CK could just as easily get on top of the Jakiro without much effort. So what we want to do is maybe bring the Jakiro with our Dragon Knight, and again, send the Queen of Pain out for split pushing. Now, sometimes you're going to be making the right play without even using that mini-map knowledge, but the more deliberate you can be with how you deploy your heroes, the more deliberate you can be with your movements and your intentions, the better off you'll be. And the best way to be deliberate is by knowing where the enemy heroes are. So hopefully that sounds okay to you. To sum it up, you are keeping track of heroes' last known locations in the back of your mind so that stuff like this doesn't happen. The next point about vision ties in map pressure. So you can actually use pressure and enemy responses to your pressure to offer a lot of information about their whereabouts. For example, if a large wave, like we have down here, is not being farmed by any of these heroes, and let me just quickly switch the fog around. Okay, so I'm CK over here. This is currently not being farmed. I don't see where their carry is. Why is Juggernaut not down here? Why is he not farming this? Or the DK for that matter. This is farm that's relatively safe for them. I can start inferring a lot of things about their positions. For one thing, they're probably not in the area. If I've already been watching this, for example, for 15 seconds and still someone is not over here, then that probably means that they weren't even on this side of the map. If in another 10 seconds, still another hero does not appear to farm this and it starts beating away at their tower, then I should warn my team that DK, Juggernaut, some of these heroes might be making an aggressive play on this side of the map. I might have to start pinging my Mars, hey, get out of there, they're going to be on top of you in the next 5 seconds. What I want to leave you with right now, if you are in a lower rank or even a middle rank, is don't get caught up in chains of deductions and inferences at these lower levels. Your opponents play way too suboptimally, and so instead I recommend focusing on your own play, playing your own game, and applying your own pressure. Force them to react to you. Don't try to be all predictive and really cute about where they are, because they're probably not playing properly anyways. Let us proceed to the application of that knowledge. We'll begin with tips on strategy, including split pushing and ganking. The first question actually came from a previous video. Somebody asked, which lane should you gank as a mid? And so I want to talk a little bit about the differences between ganking the safe lane and ganking the off lane. And of course, whether you are up or whether you are down, what runes you get, all of those things matter. Let's just put some of that obvious stuff that you can maybe figure out for yourself aside for now. In this particular example, let's say I'm Pangolier and I have a Medusa in the safe lane. If she has had a hard lane and I need to get her online, there's a couple ways to do it. Obviously, I can try to kill the Doom. Doom is typically a very difficult kill in lane, especially if he has a support with him. Now, if we have 3 heroes there and we have a Lion provides enough lockdown, then I should be confident that we can kill this Doom. So, okay, that's a good one. What did I do just then? I evaluated my safe lane. Do they need the gank or not? I took a look at the offlaner. Is that an actual gankable target? And I considered my support as the backup. Yes, with our 3 heroes, we can kill this Doom, and it would greatly benefit the Medusa. Now, what if this is a stalemate, or what if I decide I absolutely cannot kill this offlaner? Who's in my safe lane? Do we have a hero that can provide some momentum for us? What if it's a Magnus? If he's getting shut down, he obviously can't do a lot around the map. But if I can give him a good start or a little bit of a push, he can get that blink dagger, he can return the favor, he can go help out our safe laner as well. So I can't tell you in this short amount of time anything too definitive. All I can say is that a couple of things I look at is, first of all, the actual kill potential. Second of all, if everyone's having a tough game, how does the gank benefit my team? Would it be more beneficial to get some sort of a tempo here online? Probably. An example of that in the offlaner might be a Slardar. Slardar, once he gets going, he can help the rest of the team open things up as well. If it's something like we saw in the last game, the Lycan, he's basically going to play his own game whether I help him or not. He's going to stay back and farm neutrals. He's going to try to get a Helm of the Dominator. He's going to split push when no one's around. Beastmaster is a hero who's kind of in between. Beastmaster, you can have these Helm of the Dominator Beastmasters, and they want to go a little bit slower, play more of a farming game, and they might be bigger later on. Or you have these Beastmasters, sometimes they want to get a Blink Dagger right away. So it depends on what your team wants to do. It depends on how you see them playing the game, and you know what, you could just ask them. But typically, is it as simple as, oh, you go and gank the safe lane because that's where your carry is, or, oh, you go and gank the off lane because you might activate your offlaner? No, you can also consider it's more important in this game if I shut down their enemy carry. That also gives more time and space to my team. Or you just look for the easiest gank, plain and simple. Somebody's playing up too far, like this Magnus, I'm going to try to go over there. So there's a lot of things to consider, but hopefully me just raffling them off like that may have opened your eyes to a few of them. The next tip is very general, and it is that being the aggressor is beneficial. Why? Because you force reactions. So unless enemies have predicted you or they've over-prepared in their defense, you can get away with a lot. For example, even though I can't rewind further in this replay, how could something like this have happened? Maybe because this tower was exposed or there was only one hero underneath it, Bounty Hunter, Invoker, Bristle, they saw an opportunity to jump this hero. And if they make that first play, if they get the jump on a hero, let's just say it's Disruptor under the tower, that's probably a kill. The enemy team has to react. You are then counting down their TPs for them to arrive. So that's 3.5 seconds or so that you can get in and try to get out. If they stagger their TPs because they didn't have their defense prepared, then you can start kind of picking them off one by one. PA and Bristle are both really good heroes at doing that because they're not reliant on one huge cooldown. So being aggressive for kills and skirmishes is just one example of where it's beneficial for you to force the reactions. Another one is really straightforward. Let's just say I'm split pushing down a lane, and I decide that I'm going to walk here, I'm going to push these creeps, and I'm going to attack this enemy tower. As soon as an enemy TPs to this tower, I know that they can then not reinforce this side. They have to walk all the way over to do something here. So I might just go hide in these trees, in the fog, TP down here, head up the tower, and by the time I'm attacking this, they haven't even started making a move yet. So I've given my team a numbers advantage on this side, or whatever it is that we're doing. But the point is, I was aggressive here first, they TP'd to react to me, and that possibly opened up something on the other side of the map. And what I would say building off of that point is be aware of your TPs. You know those stalemates really early on in the game where 3 heroes are here, 4 heroes are here, and you're just kind of watching each other and you're waiting for something else to happen? Try not to TP to another lane because you don't know when that fight is going to break out. So I would advise if I'm here on the Radiant and we're in a bit of a stalemate, I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk to the other lane. I'm going to start pushing it a little bit. And then in the event that something breaks out here, I can just TP back and help my team. I'm not actually out of the fight. And the enemies might misread the situation and assume that I can't get back in time. Moving on now to pressure and creating openings. I have a general rule that you should push the creeps past the middle point or past the river when you want to make an effective move. And this is a mistake that I see costs a lot of players. And this is how they get split pushed. This is how they run out of time to be able to take Roshan or whatever the objective is. So let's just say, for example, here I'm Radiant. As my heroes respawn, we want to try to make a move on Rosh, or we want to make a push. In order to buy enough time, we should try to get the creeps out, first of all, to avoid split pushing. Let's just say I'm a single carry, though, and I want to make a move on the other side of the map. If I'm PA down here, so there we go, I just updated the game, and let's just say I was seen down here on PA. If I go missing now, and I join my team for a smoke gank or whatever it is, my intentions are much more obvious to the enemy team. Why would I abandon this lane that is still really close to my tower and relatively safe, and I've abandoned this creep wave coming into farm, I've abandoned whatever else is in the area. This is really fishy. The enemy sees that I'm not here, and I was, and now they start thinking, okay, where's the enemy team using the PA? Because she should be farming. So that's one more advantage of pushing the creep waves up to the river, is it doesn't make your intentions when you leave the lane more obvious. And we can continue talking about split pushing. So somebody else asked, how do you split push and how do you stop it? There's a lot to consider here. Creep wave positions, minimap tracking, poking versus committing for your split push styles, and defending as well on the other end. You defend with certain heroes. You use their spells to defend while other heroes on your team are playing forward. A lot of this is case by case, but I can get into perhaps a couple of general situations. So I already mentioned having your creep waves pushed up. That provides a buffer from being split pushed. Now let's just say I'm the Dire. All right, we're Puck, we're Abaddon, we're Ricky, Disruptor, and Alchemist. And this PA, she's losing with her team, and so she starts split pushing us. Well, we finally start pushing down the map. We're pushing down mid, and we're knocking down these towers, and we rotate over here, and we're knocking down this tower. And PA, we see she's over here, and then she's over here, and then she's over here. First of all, you could be setting a trap. So you know that's not very effective. If you just TP a bunch of heroes over here, PA gets to run away. Hopefully everyone's aware of the fact that you could TP to these outposts, and when you're trying to catch a split pusher off guard, this is very valuable. So I might TP the Puck to the outpost because he's got the most catch. He's going to be able to catch her with his Dream Coil. Also, use something like this little cliff. Again, if you are already preempting and preparing for being split pushed, ideally, you already have these things in mind. You've already got this cliff warded while you're pushing on the other side of the map. And it is strictly for catching an anti-mage or a PL or whatever hero it is. If the lanes are reversed, if you're still Dire, but you're pushing this top lane and you're pushing the mid lane, then you want to ward this cliff over here. You know that anti-mage is going around between your ancient camps. And then when it comes to catching the anti-mage, it's obviously a little bit harder because you don't have the outpost. Now, you could set a trap where you TP somebody to the outpost, you take the twin gate, they emerge on this side. I would just caution against something like that because it's very time consuming. What you could try to do is time something such that you make a push, you take out a tower, and then when you try to come back and get the anti-mage, you can line it up with taking a tormentor. Otherwise, in this situation, I might just send one hero back. Now, what heroes do you send back? Let's just say I have this draft over here, and these are the heroes that we're trying to catch an anti-mage with. I don't want to get rid of Warlock. If he leaves our draft, if he leaves our little cluster of heroes, the enemies see that as a weakness. There's no Golem. There's no Fatal Bonds. That's an easy jump onto our team. Bounty Hunter is not really going to stop an anti-mage on his own. He's just going to annoy him a little bit. Although a Bounty Hunter might provide enough threat. Typically, if you have a Bounty Hunter tracking you and starting to auto-attack you, you might think, okay, they're on me now. Bounty Hunter's got me tracked, and so they're going to start appearing on me or around me very soon. So Bounty Hunter could get through with a bit of a mind game. Your best bet, supposing you have this draft, is maybe Invoker on your own, or you say, you know what, guys, we're going to reset. Let's take over this shrine, this outpost over here. We can walk a couple of heroes back. We can TP one or two heroes back, reset the pressure in the lane so that everything is pushing past river again, force the anti-mage on his side of the jungle, and then you could always come back to this outpost over here through TPs or whatever. Ideally, when you're moving backwards to watch a split pusher, you're not giving up all of that map control that you had previously. So be clever about it and always try to get more than the opponents. And I did not write this down, but I'm remembering another comment that came in, and somebody wanted me to talk about the value of towers and how some players in his bracket, they don't realize the value of sometimes sacrificing a tower. So on that note of value, you guys have been in many scenarios where you're pushing on a tier 2 and you see that the enemy team is also pushing on a tier 2. And if you feel like you have the stronger push, if your alchemist is with Chemical Rage, if he's got Manta, if you've got Alacrity behind you, whatever it is, a Shadow Fiend, you know that you push towers more, take the trade. Go for it. Get into a little bit of tier 3 trade action, force them to react to you. And again, you could always back off the map together, spread out, I don't know what I clicked, and you could farm their side of the map. Similarly, it can happen with tier 1 towers. You're attacking a tier 1 on the side lane, and they're attacking a tier 1 on the other side lane. A lot of things go into this, and the higher level you are, the more that everyone's going to be on the same page. At a lower level, it might be a little difficult to get everybody in on the defense. I would usually say, let's try to save the tower because it's better for us to have more map control, and we could always get more for ourselves later. But your teammates may not think the same way. They might not TP at the right time. They might not have their spells or their BKB or whatever it is up. So you will find yourself in a lot of trades. I would just say, if you're playing with a bit of a 1v9 mentality, try to make it so that you always have a trade available, which is, again, why split pushing is so good. Like something I was discussing earlier, I don't really have the time to get into it in this video, but I would say, yes, there are certainly situations where you're making tier 1 trades, and sometimes you're even sacrificing a tower for something more. I've been in many scenarios where we've had to sacrifice a tier 2 tower because we were getting Roche. But the play was, we were going to get Roche, we're going to get Aegis on a Drow Ranger or whatever hero, we're going to push their tier 3, and then we're going to get Barracks. So we lost a tier 2, but we got Roche, kept it out of their hands, and then we also got a tier 3 tower, and maybe we get some Barracks. So again, I would say by default, you don't want to lose anything for free. You always want to have a trade in mind. And now we can go back to split pushing. How do you split push effectively? Well, some of those things that I mentioned earlier, you got to keep them in mind. Tracking enemy heroes on the minimap. You're constantly glancing at the minimap, you're seeing where heroes' icons are, and you have a rough idea, even if everybody is missing, that they were last seen in one region of the map, meaning you can move to the other side of the map and you could push down there safely. Be aware of where they could be TPing to, though. If you have this outpost control, and sometimes you want to get this before you start a split push, because it means that they can only come at you from this one direction, from their base. Other times you're going to have to split push so quickly and so frantically, you don't have time to be sending your hero toward the outpost, you just got to go. These plays, like so many others in Dota, are judgment calls, and so you just have to use, again, your game knowledge and try to be predictive and try to make the best call that you can in any given moment. I will elaborate a little bit on poking versus committing for a push. So when you're playing a hero like Phantom Lancer, for example, and you are pushing down a side lane and the enemy team is kind of respecting your space, you have more room to stay planted in the lane and to push it hard. You can use your mantas to attack the tower with you, or you can disperse your mantas to the side and you can farm the camps with those as well. A lot of people, what they're going to do is they're going to farm the jungle and the more dangerous camps with their main hero. However, if your intention is tower damage, and if you know that you have that opening, you want to keep your hero in the lane. On the other hand, if you know that enemies are always buzzing in the area and you don't have as much time as you would like, you're going to play more of a hit and run style of split push. So your main hero is almost always on the side camps or in the jungle. And every now and then you send a manta out towards the lane. They should never know where you are. And if you're able to occupy territory for a couple of minutes, it might even be beneficial for you to have a sentry on your inventory just so you can cover one of those cliffs for yourself. The whole point is you are preventing them from knowing where you are, and from their perspective, they have to play this cat and mouse game and waste a whole lot of time trying to find you in the first place. So stay hidden, every now and then send a manta, send illusion, and just split push like a rat. I already mentioned how you want to send certain heroes back and not others when you're defending a split push. So Spectre is one of those carries that can get away with TPing back because she can use her ultimate to get back into the team fight. You wouldn't want to be caught without Tidehunter, for example, because even though he might be thinking, oh, it's my job to do the side lanes, no, Tide, we actually need you in the team fight. You can't be all the way over there without a way to come back. And then one more thing that I'll say is ideally when you're being pressured, someone is still split pushing or pushing a side lane. It doesn't have to be split push with the intention of taking down towers, but it has to be alleviating pressure on the map somewhat so that the enemy team is forced to at least consider going over there. And the more you can make the enemy team ping pong around the map, even when it's a really difficult game, the more you'll start opening up space, one, for your carry to farm, and two, for vulnerabilities on their team. So if you're the team that's starting to split push a little bit, and you see that they split off their Tidehunter or their Sand King or their Timbersaw, go for the other four heroes. Go for that gank, go for that smoke play, rush them down. And a couple last little tips. Whenever you're involved in these kinds of things, don't forget about backstabbing waves as they spawn, and don't hesitate to BKB and TP out. Now let's get into micro, including laning and farming. So when heading to a lane, let's say I'm playing a mid, for example, I usually have the observer on me and I want to ward my mid lane. Sometimes, and not only from the mid lane, I might want to play a little mind game with my opponent and I put it in the trees. I hide it in the bushes. So over here on the Radiant, if I decided not to go for my ward right away, I'm going to just drop it over here. And I'll go play with my team over here for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Maybe the enemy team sees us, they click on all of our inventories, and they might assume, there's no second observer ward. The support has an observer, but the mid doesn't. So did the mid already drop the ward somewhere on this side? And then what I can do is later on, I can come back, pick it up, and I can go place it over here safely. Just a little mind game. I'm not recommending it as something that you start incorporating in all of your games. This is just one of the little things I incorporate as mind games become more of a factor at higher levels. I could even do it down here. I could do it with my sentries. I could hide a sentry in these trees. And then as I show myself to the support, they click on me. They go, oh, this guy's got no sentry. He probably already blocked my camp, or he dewarded his. Again, there's a lot of ways that the mind games could be beneficial. Not going to get into them now. It's just an example of the kind of stuff you might incorporate if you want to play some tricks on your opponent. There are a few points here that I want to talk about regarding movement. The first one is recognizing movement patterns and programming the opponent with your own. In a lane like this, where it's a bunch of melee heroes, there's no pudge, it's not the end of the world. However, there is a Magnus here with a skewer. So, what I might be doing if I'm the ogre is I'm watching to see how this Magnus moves. In this case, I'm the Magnus, but I'm watching to see how does Magnus move. Does he have any tells for when he's approaching us if he wants to skewer? Does he do a lot of back and forth movement? And then when he wants to skewer, he steps forward. Same thing with a mid, right? There are players who are so obvious when you're playing against them. This Viper is a perfect example. I don't know about the player specifically, but I know when Vipers sometimes want to get the Viper strike or the poison attack on you, they go from having a lot of side-to-side movement and pausing their last hits to all of a sudden walking forward. And so as soon as you see that movement that comes forward a little bit, you know to back up. So that is recognizing your opponent's movement. And then what you can also do, and I try to do this on Pudge, is I program my opponents with my own movement that's fake. I have a certain way that I like to throw hooks. What I might do in lane is what I just talked about. I might do side to side, and then I'll fake throwing a hook by stepping forward. And what I want to do is I want to see how they move. If they always take the bite when I step forward and they move to the side, then I know they're looking for me stepping forward. So what I might start doing is just facing my hero forward more often and not throwing hooks for a little bit. Whatever the example is, you guys kind of get the idea. But the point is, there is deliberate programming of how you move and how your opponents perceive that. And you can make use of that on ranged heroes. You can make use of it on heroes with movement spells. You can make use of it on hook, etc. But again, I mentioned earlier with one of the tips, don't concern yourself about that at lower levels. People just move however they want. However, at higher levels, and especially around like Ancient and Divine, people are really set in how they move, and you can abuse that. In Divine and Immortal, people might be aware of those mind games, and they'll try to fake you out. The next point has to do with knowing safe and unsafe positions in lane. And this really matters when you have a ranged carry and your versus a relatively strong offlaner. In this case with Juggernaut, I don't really see where the enemy offlaner is. Okay, he's all the way up here, whatever. Your safe positions are always going to be somewhere outside of this Scatterblast radius. Conversely, obviously, your unsafe positions are within that radius and within having the Spirit Breaker get cookied on top of you. If you're somebody who likes to play Shadow Fiend, Drow Ranger, what else? What are some ranged carries that I can't think of right now? Lina in the safe lane, whatever it is. You have to be aware of your safe and unsafe positions. If you cannot afford to get jumped, then you are only entering into those unsafe positions when it comes to last hitting the creeps. Otherwise, you're mostly sitting outside. But again, enemies can recognize how you play, and they can take advantage of that. This is not a good replay that I've loaded up to get into the example. So all I will recommend about this point is with whatever heroes you play and whatever the matchup is, quickly and immediately recognize your safe and unsafe positions. And if you're a hero that relies more on farming in the early game, play in those safe positions. Don't overextend. Don't make silly plays at the cost of getting a Lotus, because a Lotus is not worth your life. Don't go into an unsafe position that, for example, if this Spirit Breaker comes in and he wants to contest on the creeps or something like that, but Venomancer gets free auto attacks on him, it's not worth it. The next thing in laning is abusing turn rate and auto attack trades. Now, this is something that every Storm Spirit player is going to be aware of, and also every Void Spirit player and a few other heroes. Queen of Pain, a blink to get behind you, right? That was pretty cursed. Every Storm Spirit player knows that you get the most out of your ganks and your jumps if you zip behind the enemy hero. You force them to turn around, and then you zip behind them again. And you are winning this auto attack battle by constantly forcing them to use their turn rate to face you. Now, even when you're in lane and you're a support, you can use this to your advantage. Think about when you get into an auto attack trade between, let's say, a Rubik and a Lion. Whoever turns around first is going to have to literally turn around, take one more auto attack before they can run away. So what I like to do if I'm in these support trades, and I'm Rubik, for example, I fade bolt right away. So not only am I doing a little bit of damage reduction before their auto attacks come in, but I'm also getting the psychological edge in this auto attack trade war. I'm forcing them, by virtue of taking more damage and being more unsafe, to turn around first, and I'm getting one extra auto attack in my trade. The next thing we can talk about is missing heroes in lane. So I don't think it happens too much in this game. But let's just say down here, if Venomancer were to go missing and you had the Snapfire and the Spirit Breaker versus the Juggernaut, what does it mean? Just try to think about that. Where did Venomancer go? Is he being greedy? Is he farming his own neutral camp with Plague Wards? Or is he stacking for the Juggernaut? What do you want to do with that information? Do you have the opportunity to dive the Juggernaut with your Spirit Breaker? Because who's going to come in? If you're aware of TPs being down, or if you know that Lena's no HP and she's no use, go for the dive. Maybe you want to send Snapfire out, take 20 seconds away from hitting this Juggernaut, and go find the Venomancer, and then Spirit Breaker can charge him. The point is, always pay attention to when an enemy hero is missing from the lane, and try to make use of that 2v1. If you're on the other side, keep in mind that when you leave your lane, you are leaving your core or your support exposed. This always happens when runes spawn, and I would say in the lower levels, at 7 minutes, you notice the support's not there. You don't have to make a beeline to try to contest the Wisdom rune. Try to get a kill on the offlaner. And I'll just give one more example, and this goes back to keeping track of what the opponents are doing. If I am watching this lane over here, and let's just say I'm Ogre Magi again, Magnus keeps on disappearing, and yet he's never gone mid, he's never shown near this river rune, then I probably know he's not going to set up ganks, he's not doing anything like that. He's going back to set up stacks. So at the higher level, you are taking information that is not presented to you. You're taking the absence of information and you are processing that. Finally, the last tip for laning is experimenting with creep aggro. So here on Undying, of course, everybody knows about pulling creeps back to you, and that's normally what the enemy carry does, is they pull the creeps towards them for safer last hits. But just experiment, have fun, see what happens if you're the offlaner especially, when you pull creeps to the left, or when you pull them a little bit more to the right. And you're going to see a lot of new situations present themselves. When you pull the creeps to the left, suddenly any kind of support trades that are going on over here are that much more isolated and separated from the cores being on this side. So if you have a stronger offlaner, now you can abuse that extra space you have to get more auto attacks on their core. If you are the stronger support over here, you now have more time away from the core helping out to hit their support. Let's talk about one more thing here, preempting your opponent with your spells ready. I'm Lion, so I'm over here, my lifestealer's in the lane, he is farming or waiting for something. I shouldn't just be positioned like this, or even like this. I'm facing the action, that's great, but you should also consider having your spell primed and ready to go. Now, I have this option in the game where I don't have the instant cast or whatever it's called, so I have to click my ability to use it. But somewhere in the options, you do have the... Here it is, guys. Quick cast triggers on key press by default. So if you have this off, and my cursor's waiting in the middle of the lane, I'm just like this. All I have to do is press Q, and my Earth Spike goes. Again, I do not have that option ready, so if my plan is to Earth Spike, then I'm going to hold it like this. If my plan is to Hex a carry, like a PA that jumps on my lifestealer, then I'm waiting like this. So it's one thing to be there when somebody's about to happen, when a play is about to break out. It's another thing to save that split second and be able to react almost instantly. This next tip has to do with using your spells for farming. So if I'm coming out of the jungle and there's a little bit of a creep wave, I just want to use my auto attacks. There were not enough creeps there that were worth nuking. Instead, I'm going to save my nuke. I'm going to nuke the second creep wave, and that just gets me in and out of the lane much faster than had I blown my cooldown over here and then been forced to auto attack even more creeps. So again, this is just a point about optimization and efficiency. The quicker I get in and the quicker I get out means the enemies lose track of me quicker, means I'm not susceptible to being ganked as easily. Also, because I just farmed a lot faster, I can move on to my next camp for farming that much quicker. Another point is to always be aware of the clock. So I mentioned in a previous video how you should always try to get a stack as you're approaching the minute mark, or at least pay attention to it. But another one has to do with your farming patterns. If I'm farming the enemy jungle and I want to cut over to these creep camps over here, I might be able to time it. Not might, but I can actually plan on doing this with when the enemy creep wave is coming out. Now, you know that enemy creeps are spawning every 30 seconds. If you don't know where the enemy creep wave is on the map, you could always look at your own, and then you can infer that theirs is opposite the lane to yours. So if my creep wave is over here, about middle in our bottom lane, then theirs is about middle of their bottom lane as well. The last point when it comes to farming is positioning heroes outside of enemy high ground to farm multiple waves. So you could use 3 or a 4 during a siege. You can split them off the main lane, you could send them off to the side, and they can farm the wave that comes out, so you're constantly pressuring 2 lanes. And if something doesn't work out over here, you might be able to swing over here. Now, I say a 3 or a 4. You could also use mantas on the 1 position, again, because you don't want to remove your main team fight threat. So if you have a Magnus, you don't want to send your Magnus over here, 1, because he could be jumped, and then you're not fighting with an RP, or 2, because the rest of your heroes can be jumped, and again, there's no RP. My preferred way is always that my core has a manta, but in the event that they don't, maybe it's a 4 position. And sometimes it's not even staying here and farming the wave. Sometimes all I like to do is get the creep wave, and then I'll drag it back towards my carry, and they can even meet me over here. Just try to consider that when you're in a siege, you can't have all of your heroes here and still be letting the lanes and the creep waves push out. You should try to gather the creeps or cut them off. So that is it for most of the tips and explaining them in detail. And now I have a fun section here, Dota Philosophies. Something that I came up with is viewing the deaths per hero as a shared percentage of your total team's death. So for example over here, yes, we won this game, and I remember I had some good lassos in it as well. But look at this, I died 11 times, and out of a total of 39, I'm around 30% of my team's deaths, and I'm only one of the heroes on my team. If everything were equal, everyone would have about 20% of the total deaths. Obviously, you don't want your carry to die that much. You probably don't want your core in the mid to die that much either, but still, I feel like this as a 5 position is still too much. At least I should have the attitude that I could always get better. So 11 deaths, but everyone else didn't die too much. Okay, you know what? That's not the worst thing in the world, but I can still work on minimizing this for my next game. So how can you take this and apply it to yourselves? Maybe if you find yourself on a losing streak, you might want to check out those games again and see how many times you died compared to the rest of your team. If you are a core and you're dying more than 20% of your team's total deaths, it's too much. As a 1 position, as a 2 position, you want to try to be below that, and you can let your supports be a little bit above that. My second philosophy has to do with reading the flow of pressure in the lanes. And this is something that you don't have to use in your games. If you never thought about pressure this way, I don't think it would affect you negatively. But what I like to do, aside from just looking at where the waves are on the minimap, is I take a look at the waves themselves up close, and I see how many creeps there are per side. And then what I do with this visual in my head, I see that, okay, Radiant has more creeps here. The flow of pressure in the bottom lane is towards Dire. So you can imagine there's a huge arrow that points from Radiant to Dire on the minimap. Pressure is going in this direction. What about here? There's more Dire creeps. Pressure in the middle lane is heading towards Radiant. What about here? Okay, probably going to come down this way. Pressure towards the top lane is also towards Radiant. Now, because this is something that I look at fairly often, I can just go like this, like this, like this, and I know the direction of pressure in all 3 lanes, and I know that we are technically losing 2 of the 3 lanes. This is the only one that's going to create anything for us. What do I do with this information? Well, I know that I can expect a carry on their team, like the Wraith King or some hero like that, to probably appear over here. Wraith King is not going to be on this side. Or, because these lanes are already pushing, they probably don't want to be sitting here with any of their heroes. They might want to work on this side of the map. Interpret it however you want, but the point is, there is some information there, reading in an instant where the direction of pressure is tilted. And finally, the final philosophy has to do with game plans and opportunism. Have a plan, but don't be afraid to deviate from it. So in my last video, I talked about how I have a systematic approach to moving around the map and taking down enemy towers. On support, I also have a game plan. On Bat Rider, early on, I'm trying to get some stacks in the jungle. I might farm a couple of those for myself to try to get a fast blink dagger. Then I can use the stacks for my carry. And I also want to be present and with a hero on my team who can always get a kill with me. Muerta, easy. Invoker, if he's not support, if he's got levels, Meatball, Sunstrike, that should be a kill as well. Basically, everybody on my team, except for Tidehunter. And Pangolier is a little bit harder for me to work with, but he's got a lot of damage as well. So my game plan, after getting my Blink Dagger and after getting the easy early game kills, is to hover around one of my teammates that A, I can get kills with them, and B, I can protect them if need be. Now, how would I deviate from that? Well, let's just say we start losing miserably, and all of our lanes are getting pushed in, and we can't really do anything about this death ball of Underlord, Phoenix, and Wraith King. We have to split up a little bit. I'm going to have to say, Muerta, I'm going to be back later. I'll TP when I need to. I'm heading out over here. I'm pushing and split pushing, and I'm trying to get my team some more space on the map. I'm trying to get this Nature's Prophet to TP. I'm trying to get the Underlord to use his ultimate and to split them up a little bit. Then when the enemies are split up, hopefully I can get back to my team alive, or my Pangolier, my Tidehunter, they can get a jump on somebody. Muerta gets a couple of kills in her ultimate, and they back out. Or depending on the result, they move in a little bit further. Another one that includes changing your plan and sometimes doing this on the fly with your items. I had one game where I was Rubik and I was versus a Storm Spirit. Storm Spirit got off to a killing spree. He got something like 7 kills in a row. And I figured there's no point in me playing safe. There's no point in me doing my Glimmer Cape and my Force Staff. We're just going to get run over. It's not going to help. And so I pivoted to a Rod of Atos. And what happened? As soon as I had the Rod of Atos completed, Storm Spirit didn't see it coming. I held him down in mid. My teammates jumped on him. We got a kill. The game turned from there, and we won. So this goes back to having game knowledge. This goes back to being flexible. You have to be able to pivot when the game doesn't look like it's going to be ideal or follow a rigid game plan, and you have to try to find new ways to eke out advantages. And that brings us to the end. To sum it all up, I'll just reiterate these 4 final tips. Number 1, continue to become more knowledgeable. Number 2, have a plan, but don't be afraid to deviate from it. Number 3, farm faster. And number 4, push with nearly every given opportunity. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the whole Dota series on the channel if you enjoyed it. It might not be the end. I might do a couple more replay analyses, maybe Divine, maybe Immortal, but that is it for these tutorials and these tips and these long info dumps. So once again, everybody, just a big thank you. It's been a lot of fun for me diving back into Dota. As always, like I say, please use the comments section. I'm always reading the comments, and so if there's anything that you want to ask, if there's anything that you want to request, I will read it and we can interact there. All right? Thanks again. Bye-bye.